A very good evening to one and all present. It is indeed privilege and pleasure to welcome all the viewers to this webinar on the key role of regulators, a step towards greener economy, organized by the Sustainability Reporting Standards Board of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India as part of the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav initiative envisioned by the Government of India to commemorate and celebrate 75 years of India's independence. COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated systemic changes that were apparent before its inception. The fault lines that emerged in 2020 now appear as critical crossroads in 2021. Low carbon, resource efficient, and socially inclusive green economy is crucial to the COVID-19 recovery process. Green economy promotes a new economic paradigm, one in which material wealth is not earned at the cost of growing environmental degradation, ecological destruction, and social disparities. So we are very fortunate to have an elite panel of speakers who will share their valuable insights and perspectives on the crucial role of regulators and policymakers towards sustainable growth and greener economy, the present policy framework, as well as various challenges at national and subnational level, and the ways in which stakeholders can be engaged for strong support towards the same. We are extremely delighted to have with us CA Nihar N. Jambusaria sir, Honorable President ICAI. Honorable President sir is a blend of erudition, experience, foresight, technical expertise, and professional excellence worth emulating. He is leading the profession with decades of experience, vision, and strong organizational skills, with a firm belief in all-round inclusive growth of the Indian chartered accountancy profession at global level, with focus on technological innovation, public advocacy, financial literacy, and focus on sustainability. He intends to translate his passion for the inclusive growth of the profession through the transformational agenda that the current paradigm merits. So, sir will be giving his inaugural address.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. CA Praveen Garg ji, Special Secretary and Financial Advisor, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and other speakers, CMS Sanjay Gupta, CA Pratiksha, and Mr. Shikhar Jai. Welcome to this meeting, and let me compliment the Sustainability Reporting Standards Board for organizing this meeting at the time when India is celebrating its Amrit Mahotsav, 75th year, and India is being seen as Vishwaguru Bharat, a step towards greener economy. As we understand, the entire world has become very conscious about sustainability. And more particularly, every country of the world has laid focus on climate change. And we observe that, as predicted, if we continue to behave in the same manner and the temperature rises by 1.5 degrees, then the existence of the entire earth is in danger. And at this point of time, apart from other sustainability development goals, I think India should lead climate change SDG to the maximum extent. And whenever such emergencies come, India is known for its capacity, energy, and aggressive attitude to deal with the situation. We have expert speakers here today to address the gathering. And as a part of the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav celebration, this is one contribution of SRSB to the celebration agenda. And I'm sure that there will be further steps which the SRSB will take to support the government initiative on sustainability. all stakeholders, regulators, consumers, businesses, and industry have to take their responsibility and reinforce each other to build a better future. The road to decarbonization, that is reducing carbon output, implies that industries revamp the way they produce, and we, individuals, review what we purchase. Decarbonization is the new economic engine for sustainable growth. And there is another challenge for particularly corporates who are reporting on sustainability, the challenge of matching the data of sustainability with the financial statements. And this is also being discussed at international level in greater detail at IIRC and at Value Creation Board. These are also in discussion. I think now we will have to think of triple bottom line, that is profit, which is the bottom line that we learned as chartered accountants when we were studying. But now other two bottom lines have been highlighted, and that is people and profit. Today we talk of profit, people, and planet. Time may come when we will have to start with planet, think of people, and then profit. And I believe that if Earth exists, people will be there. And if we people are there, then profit has value. Otherwise, profit is meaningless. So we will have to earn profit in the way that people survive and the planet again refurbishes and grows. So with this, I thank you for inviting me, and I thank Praveenji for sparing his valuable time and the speakers for speaking on this very important subject, which is so relevant for human existence and growth in terms of value. Thank you so much.
Thank you, President Sir, for your kind words of wisdom. Rightly said, decarbonization is the right engine for economic growth, and triple bottom line time has come, and the planet has to be put before people, and the planet has to be put before profit. So with these words, we move on to our keynote speaker. We are very privileged to have C. Praveen Garbji with us. He is currently the Special Secretary and Financial Advisor, Ministry of Environment, Climate and Change. Sir has a very enriched experience. He's an IS officer of the Madhya Pradesh cadre with 33 plus years of experience in various important positions in policy making. He is presently serving as the Special Secretary and Financial Advisor at the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Sir is entrusted with crucial responsibility to provide sound financial expertise on various environmental and forest-related initiatives of the ministry. Exercising control over the various finance-related divisions of the ministry gives him a bird's eye view of not just the domain of environment, forest and climate change, but also to connect the dots with the financial aspect and implications for the budgetary allocations and how to achieve the objective of sustainable development within limited available financial resources. He also leads implementation and oversight of schemes, missions, and initiatives in line with the nationally determined contributions submitted by India to the UNFCCC, administration of forestry-related initiatives of the ministry at the national level, including the biennial forest surveys of India and overseeing financing of various missions, such as the Green India Mission. Sir is also proactively associated with ICAI and is instrumental in enriching the Institute's evolving intellectual base with his rich understanding and expertise of the domain, primarily in environment, finance, and climate change. With these words, I welcome you, sir. And sir will be giving his address on the role of regulators, environmental policies, and outcomes. So please unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry. So very good evening to everyone, and I would like to thank the Institute of Chartered Accountants for giving me this opportunity to speak on the role of regulators. It's always a pleasure to speak in any forum which is for the Institute of Chartered Accountants, because it's like my alma mater. I qualified, of course, long back. It looks as if it was yesterday, but it is more than now 36 years when I was conferred with your degree of Chartered Accountancy. I welcome the distinguished panel here, the President of the Institute, Shri Nihal Jamnuseria ji, CMA Sanjay Gupta ji, Prateek Shah, and Mr. Shikhar Jain, and of course the coordinator, UTC. I would also give a warm welcome to the participants who are probably online listening to this panel. And the topic which has been given to me, or specifically where I'm supposed to speak, is the key role of regulators, a step towards greener economy. Now, when I was, I worked nearly for 4 years as Joint Secretary Capital Markets. So my focus generally used to be only on the financial regulators or Ministry of Corporate Affairs. But when I started doing a bit of research for this topic, then I realized there are a number of other regulators also. So being a finance man, we should not just think that it is Sebi, RBI, ICAI, or these other regulators. There are other regulators in the landscape. So I would, and if you see, even the ministry where I am working is also a regulatory ministry. We also regulate. The Environment Protection Act is also a regulation. If you see the whole body of CPCBs, Central Pollution Control Board, and then you have state pollution control boards. So there is so much of regulators all over. Of course, it will translate into accounting and into finance in different manner. I would start with what the Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg is always saying, and she says that I don't want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. I want you to act as you would be in a crisis. I want you to act as if our house is on fire, because it is. If we look at the history of the mass extinctions on Earth, researchers have described the 6th mass extinction as a most serious environmental problem. Since the loss of a species, there will be permanent. Studies attribute this mass extinction to human activities. It is human anthropogenic introduced. The 5 mass extinctions that took place in last 450 million years have led to the destruction of 70 to 95% of the species of plants, animals, microorganisms that existed earlier. I think the president was also indicating towards that. Recently, a landmark study was done by Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, warned of increasingly extreme heat waves, droughts, flooding, and exceeding a key temperature limit of 1.5 degrees Celsius rise over the pre-industrial level. The chief of UN described this report as code red for humanity. Code red for humanity. The above facts should be enough for the human race to realize that we have just one planet. We don't have 2 planets. At least in the near future, we don't have 2 planets. We cannot travel to any other planet. And we have already overexploited its carrying capacity. Like we say, every place has a carrying capacity. So this planet also has a carrying capacity. So we need to act here and now for the posterity so that we are able to, it's not just a question of sustainability, but it's a question of survival of the human race. Even the UN Secretary General said if we combine forces now, we can avert climate catastrophe. But as the IPCC report makes clear, there's no time for delay, no room for excuses. So therefore, we all agree that it's a global emergency. It has no boundaries. It is beyond boundaries. It's not a national problem. It's an international problem. And any international problem requires international cooperation and coordinated solutions by all. At COP21 in Paris on 12th December 2015, countries reached a landmark agreement, which is popularly known as Paris Agreement, to combat climate change, and to accelerate and intensify the actions and investments needed for a sustainable, low-carbon future. It brings all nations into a common cause to undertake ambitious efforts to combat climate change, and the central aim of this agreement is to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change by keeping a global temperature rise this century well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and to pursue the efforts to limit the temperature increase even further up to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Countries, apart from being members of the Paris Accord, have also taken initiatives on their own capacity to fight climate change. For example, it was in the news and it is there, US plans to become carbon neutral by 2050, while China has set the same target for itself to be achieved by 2060. India, on part of India being a signatory to the Paris Agreement, has pledged to reduce the emission intensity of its GDP by 33-35% by 2030 over the level of 2005. Increase the non-fossil fuel power capacity to 40% from 28% in 2015. That was 28% was in 2015. So we want to, non-fossil fuel power, we want to take it to 40%. And to create additional carbon sink of 2.53 billion tons of carbon dioxide to additional forest and tree cover by 2030. Now, to achieve such ambitious targets, regulators play a major role in providing the guidelines, in regulating the different entities, whether commercial or non-commercial entities. A well-designed regulatory framework will provide a legal basis that government authorities can rely on for monitoring and enforcing compliance, which can create rights and incentives that drive green economic activity, remove barriers to green investments, regulate unsustainable behavior, and supplement the environmental policies that in place to achieve the desired outcomes. Environmental policies and outcomes depend on a number of factors, such as legislations, regulatory framework, and overall policy prescription followed by the country. These are ever-evolving dimensions. India has seen numerous tweaking and evolution of various environmental policies and related rules and regulations over the years. For example, Environment Protection Act 1986, that was a beginning, is one of the all-encompassing environmental legislations of India, and it has evolved over years. It has, just to give an idea, it has number of amendments in this act. Now it is proposed that EP, Environmental Protection Act, Air Act, Water Act, to be consolidated into a single environmental management law, prevent overlaps and conflicts, incorporate provisions relating to environmental compensation and tools like emission trading scheme, extended producer responsibility. So this is what the ministry right now, this ministry is working on. This multiple kind of law, regulations, and no clarity which organization or different organizations looking at the same thing. This increases the cost of doing business, plus the cost of compliance with the different laws goes up. So the key regulators, I'll be talking about the key regulators who are on the landscape, on the regulatory landscape. Of course, RBI, Sebi, Ministry of Corporate Affairs are well known, but we have ICAI as well as PFRDA. ICAI is also in the insurance sector, has under the stewardship guidelines guiding the insurance companies how to make their investments, how to govern, how the corporate governance of the investee companies, insurance companies should be done. So it is focusing, I think, more on the greener part of that. So when they invest in the companies, they are also considering the green component, the greening part in the activities of that company. There was recently a statement by ICAI member that the institution, the large institutional investors like insurance companies should support the low carbon economy. These large investors should allocate investments towards assets that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This is because climate change has implications on both sides of the balance sheet of the insurer, assets as well as the liabilities. Insurers globally could move to a new era of disclosures where the new types of losses can be caused by the climate change, including extreme heat or melting of glaciers, which can be reflected in the companies. So ICAI as a regulator is doing nudging to the insurance companies to invest in the right direction, and I feel even the risk for the insurers will go up if they don't nudge the companies in the greener direction because of natural calamities or the sudden climate change disasters. Then the second regulator which I would like to talk about is PFRDA, that is a Pension Fund Regulatory Authority. And all we know that it has huge funds now coming in. After even the government stopped that predetermined pension scheme, even the government servants are on NPS scheme, National Pension Scheme. So these funds are going to the different schemes, NPS schemes, and PFRDA is regulating the investment to different sectors. So I think that nudging is also happening, and they have reduced the credit rating from AA to single A if the companies to a green activity or greening of the activities. The third, I would be talking about the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. It was constituted in 2002 under the provision of the Energy Conservation Act. They have a scheme called PAT, Perform, Achieve, Trade. It's a regulatory instrument to reduce specific energy consumption in energy intensive industries. And then they have a trading mechanism, then they have a market mechanism to trade between the, if the industry is more cost effective, less emissions, it can trade with a company which is industry which is emitting more carbon. So this is a certification system which they do, and they are into the sixth cycle of perform, achieve, and trade pact. And under this, they have designated consumers 135. These consumers are generally thermal power plants or the steel plants or the bigger consumers. And these are from 6 sectors. With the implementation of PACT Cycle 6, it is expected to achieve a total energy saving of 1.277 million or megatons of oil equivalent, which is a huge figure. And it will translate into 70 million tons of carbon dioxide avoidance to be achieved by March 2023. So this scheme of BE, Bureau of Energy Efficiency, is evolving, and it's a major scheme which reduces the carbon footprint and gives incentive to the industry, designated companies, to reduce their carbon emission. And if they do it, they can even trade with the companies which are not able to reduce it for whatever reasons, maybe the capital expenditure required to reduce the carbon emissions. Then we have CERC, that is a Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, which is again a power sector. B is Bureau of Energy, and that's energy, this power sector. And similarly, we have in every state, there's a SERC, State Electricity Regulatory Commission. So they have this system of RPO, Renewable Purchase Obligations. So when the electricity is supplied, discounts to the consumer, is a certain proportion which has to be from a renewable source. So that bundling has to be done. And if they're not able to do that bundling from a renewable source and from a fossil source, or there's a deficit, then there is a renewable purchase obligation, which suppose one DISCOM has taken more from a renewable source, then that trading can be done. So this is a way, and it's mandatory to have a certain portion in that bundle from the renewable source of energy. They also issue certificates, renewable energy certificates, which are being traded, which can be traded, and if one DISCOM is deficient in that, it can buy that. One DISCOM is having surplus, it can be traded. So there's an incentive on that part also. And we in India are now looking forward to revamp the tradable renewable energy certificates mechanism also, so that there's a boost to greener energy and renewable energy. We have then we have one new regulator, which I think many chartered accountants are not happy with it. That is National Financial Reporting Authority. So that is for the listed companies, which has been created under the new Companies Act, and which will be the independent regulator for accounting and auditing. And it will also improve the quality of all corporate financial reporting in India. Then the major regulators are RBI. RBI in Reserve Bank of India issued a notification on corporate social responsibility, sustainable development, and non-financial reporting, role of banks and mentions the importance of global warming and climate change in the context of sustainable development. The Reserve Bank has also been taking proactive policy measures to promote and support green finance initiatives. Recently, it has included small renewable energy sector projects under the priority sector lending, PSL, as we popularly call it, in 2015. And this is the firms are eligible up to the loan up to 30 crores and households up to 10 lakh. RBI is also stressed on the need for development of local green bond markets. So that is also, and Sebi, when I was in the capital markets division, we were promoting green bonds issuances, and there were even masala green bonds which were issued on the London Stock Exchange. So RBI is progressing and nudging, promoting green financing. Of course, they have not so far introduced some system of incentive or penalty if the greening is less in the project financing. So I think they will be moving towards that. The Central Bank of China has that system of giving incentives, concessions, if the project is, the activities in the project are greened, greening is there. So that is what the RBI, I think, in due course of time will be doing. Of course, what they're doing is just nudging little bit of encouragement to that. But that concessional financing, except for priority sector, and that too on a smaller scale, is not there. But I think that slowly it will be coming in the market. Of course, RBI notified a scheme called Voluntary Retention Group. This is notified in 2019. This is beyond external commercial borrowings, where the foreign funding can be retained for renewable sector. But again, it has a cap on that. It is not unlimited, because RBI has to see the foreign currency management and the overall risk due to foreign borrowings. RBI has joined a group called Network for Greening the Financial System. They have a central bank groups, so they have joined that greening the financial system. I hope in due course of time they will come out more guidelines and incentives, lower cost of financing for the green projects. So it's and the most I think the most well-known and most popular regulator for most of the chartered accountants is Sebi, Securities and Exchange Board of India, and MCA, which even governs, which looks after the chartered accountants act also. So Sebi is the securities market regulator in India, and it is contributing to green transition by promoting transparency through disclosure of material, environmental, social, and governance related information. We all, I think most of us know that recently Sebi has come out new guidelines on the ESG and the reporting requirement on that, where they are saying that top 1,000 listed companies from 22-23 have to give a report, business responsibility and sustainability report. And I was seeing the annexure of that report. That circular has two annexures, Annexure A and Annexure B. Annexure A is quite granular. It requires too much of detailing is there. Annexure B provides the guidance how to fill up your Annexure A. So from 22 financial year 22-23, top 1,000 listed companies have to do that. I think I don't have the figures, but that would mean at least 75% or 80% of the market capitalization just happened. They have to report. And if anyone, I would request to see that annexure. It's quite granular data. So the previous requirement of business responsibility reporting did not have that kind of granular data. It didn't have that minute details. So this is an improvement over that. So Sebi has come out with this and they're making it mandatory. So I think the people who are in the profession of chartered accountancy and who are doing the audit of the listed companies, they have to be filling up all this. They have to check all this data. Filling up, of course, this is a duty of the management to provide you the information, but doing an audit or having certifying that it's true and fair cannot be, giving a kind of a 100% certificate. So that's going to be a huge thing. And if you see, from my understanding, ESG, if we measure any company on ESG, and if we see all those around 300 or whatever number of those parameters, my take would be any company which is doing well on ESG parameters, in long term, the market value, the share value of that company will go up because it's not only environment. Environment has number of components. Social has number of components, including how you deal with your customers. And governance, corporate governance has number of components. It's not just governance. It has number of elements built into that. And this time, it's too many things they're asking for. So I think it's a very good move, and of course, maybe a bit cumbersome, and the compliance cost may or will go up in the initial years, but in long term, it will help the economy to reduce the carbon footprint. Similarly, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, there is a bit of at times overlap, this regulatory overlap which happens between MCA and Sebi. Because I used to look after Sebi. Sebi is in a different ministry. That is in Ministry of Finance and Department of Economic Affairs, whereas MCA is a different ministry. So this bit of overlap is there. MCA has also come out with number of guidelines. 2011, they came with national voluntary guidelines. Now again, they have come out. There is a committee on business responsibility reporting formed by MCA, and they are also so bit of. I think there's a bit of overlap, but I think it's a matter of time that that overlap will reduce. The cost of compliance with both the regulators will come down because the companies have to comply with what MC is saying, and all listed companies have to comply with what Sebi is saying. So this is, and lastly, the initiative under which we are speaking, the Institute of Chartered Accountant has also taken this Sustainability Reporting Standards Board, which is, I would say, a very good initiative, very timely initiative. It will help the chartered accountants to assess the company, and there's a modeling system which does the rating from 1 to 4. So that will help the companies to go to 4. 1 is the lowest, as I understand, is on the lower side, and then to 4. So this board will also help in guiding the chartered accountants, because when the things will go wrong in any company, then some regulator or some auditor would be asked to explain. So the Institute of Chartered Accountant has taken a great initiative, and I would, at the cost of repeating, I would say all these reporting requirements are not just the reporting requirement for just for the sake of it. It is for our survival as a human race, and these reporting requirements will force us to go in that direction. But there can be voluntary action also, which I keep propagating, is small green deeds. Small green deeds. If you're drinking water from a bottle, then please finish the whole water. Don't leave half there, half. And or when you're getting up, switch off all the lights. So it has to come in our behavior. So it has to be sustainability is for survival. And the second point, or the last point, which I would like to make, is the climate change injustice, or the climate change justice. The worst sufferers are the poor people. You see, the climate has changed. It has become warmer. But I think almost all of us are sitting in an AC environment. So we're not feeling that heat. We're not feeling that warming of the economy or warming of the environment. Or if you're in a winter setting, then we all have heaters, something to warm us up. But if you see the poor man, and India has a huge population of poor people, it's an injustice to them. They're not able to have those kind of, and if you multiply it further, the capacity of a human being or the health will get affected by climate change. I may not be so affected because I have these luxuries of some income, but the person who doesn't have his capacity to work, his health is going to be more affected. So it is our survival. And for justice also, we need to have a sustainability way of living, and sustainability way of living in small deeds as well. Of course, the bigger things we are monitoring. I would like to finish my little speech on this note, and I will again thank the Institute of Chartered Accountants for giving me this opportunity to express my views on this subject. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable insights. It is really a global emergency, and survival of human existence is questionable. And the concept of climate injustice was really something which each one of us should ponder upon. And you have really given a very good overview of what various initiatives which are being taken by the regulators, like IRDA, RBI, BE, PFRDA, and these collaborative efforts are surely going to increase the momentum of decarbonizing our economy. Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable words. We move on to our next session. This session is on challenges with the existing Indian framework and ways to accelerate the transition. I would like to welcome CMA Sanjay Gupta ji. He is the past president of the Institute of Cost Accountants of India. He has more than 27 years of experience and has in-depth expertise on a wide range of matters relating to integrated reporting, sustainability reporting, business responsibility reporting, carbon disclosure accounting, cost auditing, regulatory controls, etc. He is closely involved with International Integrated Reporting Council, IRC, London and Prince Charles Initiative on Accounting for Sustainability, and as they seek to address the implementation challenges of IR in India. And he has also given inputs during the development of IR framework in India. Sir is also instrumental in setting up the first IR lab in India. So, sir, we are very privileged to have you with us. And the topic is very important topic, which is on the challenges with the existing Indian framework and ways to accelerate the transition, how the global shift to green economy is happening, and where are the areas where more improvement can be done. So we welcome you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And special thanks to my dear friend Neha Jambusuriya ji being inviting me here. I've worked very closely with the Sustainability Reporting Standard Board also. And, maybe during working, I could see, the way things are moving. And definitely, Chartered Accountant Institute has taken a lot of initiative and a lot of steps, which is going to be the future, change the future for even the professionals. Earlier, there was an era when a chartered accountant or a cost accountant can't think of sustainability or this kind of a concepts. I remember way back in 2012-13, when we're talking about the integrated reporting or the sustainability reporting or the 6 capitals. So it was a very new buzzword. And people, when we were talking about the natural capital and the social capital and the human capital, so there was no parameters, no valuation standards. It was just a beginning. Then we worked very closely with the IARC and then Prince Charles Accounting for Sustainability. And my dear friend Shikhar also from CI, he was always in this arena for, I think, decades. And he's a person who is, well known not in India, rather than the international levels. So even with him, we did a lot of projects with CI on Tata Steel, Wipro, and Mahindra. So there the journey started from. And from the DR method, the Sebi, when they mandated the 500 Fortune companies to come under the umbrella of integrated reporting. So ideally, the idea was just to make it more voluntarily. But I'm very happy the way from 2012-13. So today, almost maybe it took 9 to 10 years. But now, maybe whether like it or not, due to the COVID pandemic, everybody is getting now very concerned about this. And when I was listening to Honorable CA Praveen Gargji, Special Secretary and Financial Advisor, and he was very candid and very loud and clear. Even for the professionals today, if we're talking about whether the RBI is issuing the green bonds, or we're talking about the 70 carbon dioxide avoidance. So this is the area which we need to talk about it. And what he was talking about, the market value for the companies, which is going to be, tomorrow you're going to invest any money. You're not just looking at the valuation part. You have to look into so many other parameters. Because slowly we look at now, things are changing. Jyoti, I send you the PPT also if you can. Okay, you look at, in the social and governance narratives, there is a 76% increase in the financial year compared to financial year 20 inflow of ESG funds. So that talks about, the backdrop and the disruption caused by the COVID-19. So nowadays, if you look at this, a multi-stakeholders consultation which is happening. There was an arena where, everybody was talking about a few shareholders, or only of the shareholders. Whether you talk about the financial institutions and investors, they're only concerned about the dividend and the stakeholder was only the shareholders. But now today, everybody is on the radar, whether we're talking about the employees, regulators, or the different regulatories. And after the COVID breakdown, I think everybody is understanding the fact we are not the master of the planets, but rather stewards of the nature. So that's a new thing which has, opened up now. So if we talk about the greater significance which is happening on the positive climate change, there is a need to build up a more sustainable, resilient future and putting money where the mouth is. That is the need of the hour. And if you look at the what is happening when we talked about the boardrooms, even when we started with the integrated reporting, even in the boardrooms, it was mere compliance. I think many professionals must be agree to that. Even when you're presenting to the board, It was more of a checkbox or a tick box kind of a approach. When there was no interdependence, even the people who were presenting the data, they were pretty not aware about it. But now the time has come, even the board is getting too much aware. Whenever we attend the board meetings, so now I think ESG or BRSR or you can say IR, it is slowly and gradually getting embedded in the DNA of the board now. And they're really getting very serious about it. And if you look at today, now the point is, there is a different value chain partners. So the point comes how to connect all of them. So when everybody in the company, whether it's the shareholders, whether it's employees or value chain partners or the local governments, when they start connecting to each other and there is an interconnectedness happening, so I think there's a real meaning which will be coming out of the ESG. And the other purpose, if we talk about this, why ESG? That's a very basic question which comes, why we're talking about. There's a lot of push and pull, investors, regulator, asset manager, and the companies. As Praveen Gargi was also mentioning, even the cost of compliance is a big concern. The moment you come with a regulation, the corporates say, their cost of compliance is going higher. But now, the moment they're getting it live in a different perspective altogether. Because now when you're looking at the investors, so when they do the research, they look at your data. So they're very sectoral specific. What companies are doing, what their policies and sustainability practices are there. So when the funds are putting their money, it is loud and clear how they want to put into it. Next, please. And if you look at the top 5 global risks, which is environmental in nature today, whether we talk about drought, we are talking about the extreme weather, whether we're talking about the rising temperature, deforestation, air pollution, mass migration. Even in, we are all in Delhi, we can see, we have broken the record of 117 years. So every now and then we are almost at the fag end of September, even today, so we could see how things are changing. So what is the biggest risk today is the environmental. Next. So this, if you look at this graph, investor interest in ESG is growing. If we talk about the number of signatories, we can see from zero how the curve is rising. And even now today, the asset management, earlier people used to just put the money into equity. Today they start owing it also. So if you look at the amount of money which is asset under management in the US trillion, you look at the graph, the way it is, climbing. I think that's the way it clearly depicts where we are heading towards and where the future lies. Next, please. And today, okay, if we talk about the investors today, whenever you see the liability of environmental damage caused by a company, someone has to repay it. So finally, what happens, when the different regulators, when different investors, when they look at it, so there is always a negative publicity around it. And even it helps in, your assets are not getting upgraded, it's getting depreciated much faster, getting obsolescence much faster. So there is always a reduced repayment capacity. And there is a reduced level of value of the collateral. So whenever you go into the financial institution or you want to raise the money and the stakes in the market, so definitely you're feeling a lot of heat there. And today in the global world, investor is getting very cautious. And you could have seen in the last years how many ESG fund has been floated. And as I was mentioning, there is always a 76% increase from in 2020, we are having a 2094 crores. We have moved to 3686 crores. So that's a phenomenal 76% increase. So that itself speaks about the volumes. Next, please. Here, if you look at, there's a data by the Bloomberg. If you talk about, I think you can look at India. So we're in 19.4. That's a disclosure scores, which generally depicts how ESG disclosure evolving. So if you look at the scoring chart, average ESG disclosure score by a country, it's starting from 18 and going up to 46. So generally we feel, the countries like US, if you look at the US here, we could see, they're just 18.5, rather India is 19.4. So even there is a myth, being so much of capitalization, so much of transparency there, still the disclosure rules or the ESG is not, the disclosure scores are not very great. Simultaneously, we look at the European markets. especially if you look at the UK, we could see 34.4. And if you look at the France, out of 48, practically they're at 46.9. And if you look at the Spain, so we could see in the entire European side, there is a much more emphasis on the disclosures, which is evolving in the parameters. So if you look at what they've taken a survey, and that is based on the 11,524 companies. So average score is coming to 24.92. And we at India is around 19.4. So I'm not saying we are doing well, but there is a lot of ground to be covered. Even we talk about Australia, they are just at 24.2. So it's not that India is so bad, but still I think we need to do a lot of work has to be done on this area. Next. And if we talk about the ESG regulations are increasing, and it is the source is the UN principles for responsible investments. And we could see, the graph, how it is a number of ESG regulations. So the way the world is moving towards. Next, please. If we look at the comparative analysis between the global and India, and if you look at the BRSR is alignment towards emerging trends. Globally, what is happening today, whatever the ESG parameters which are coming now, possibly now the Sebi is just capturing the same. Legislatures and government of various countries, if we talk about Denmark, we talk about South Africa, Malaysia, China, they've already asked the companies to make disclosures pertaining to non-financial metrics across ESG aspects. Today, if you look at in the era of blockchain, artificial intelligence, tomorrow the time is going to come when annual reports are, to a chartered accountant or a CMA, they're not supposed to make the annual reports. It will be given by the software and the system itself. So what will be the meaningful which is coming out of it? What is the value creation and value addition we are doing? When a shareholder or any stakeholder, whether it's your employees or vendors or the government, is not going to ask, what is the financial valuation. It will be just a small subset of the entire game. So what they're going to talk about, what is the value which has been brought into. So the era now, the future lies to the non-financial metrics. So that's the future now. So financial now today, and if you look at the non-financial parameter, that's going to be top of the town. And if we talk about the national laws in some of the European countries are undergoing legislative changes in accordance to the European Union non-financial reporting directives. And even the other countries, if you talk about the Australia, Mexico, USA, France, have taken a lot of initiative, and they're already on the path of climate change related reporting. So if you look at most of the forward companies and otherwise, they've already gone much ahead. Still, we have to, cover a lot of distance. Next, please. If we talk about, how is an hour, there's no companies are not needed as per the Indian scenario, whether there's only on the financial metrics. But how they're creating an impact, how the performing on the ESG metrics, that is going to be the key factor. And Sebi is also now bringing in the BRSR format by Sebi on a very timely basis, because especially when the COVID is there and the entire, when in the global, in UN, when we're talking about this thing, so Sebi has really, become the forefront, there's become the regulators agenda, how to take it forward. And thanks to COVID, COVID has brought some bad things, but it has brought some good things also. Maybe otherwise we have not seen it that way. So it has become a catalyst for ESG investing in India. So that's a good thing, despite all the other wrong things about it. So we could see, there is a lot of reporting metric which is still at a very nascent stage and somewhat globally, because whenever we do some global studies, we are doing some ESG reporting. When we're talking about initially, we were feeling, there is a different. They are much on the IT, they've done a lot of work and everything, but actually when we start looking at the data, when we do starting the research done by them, we could see, still I think even globally not much work has been done on the same. And people are now getting geared up. They're working on the different parameters. So there's a very urgent need to invest in necessary mechanism, whether to enable capturing the required data on the ESG parameters. Selection of a suitable framework and related metrics can be adopted by companies to facilitate reporting. Because definitely when you have to report, because what is happening, even when you launch integrated reporting, so point comes, how to evaluate, how to put the financial scores to that. When you talk about the natural capital and social capital, human capital, how you make it a meaningful, how you standardize them, How you will tell your investors, this company is doing good, this is doing not that good. Some parameters has to be worked upon. So that milestone has to be achieved. So I'm sure, the level of assurance which can be provided for such reporting, that will be, the first steps towards achieving this milestone. Next, please. If we talk about the push for the corporates, we could see here, ESG-related risks are proportional to operational performance. If we talk about the stock price volatility and the reputational risks, today we have seen in the Volkswagen case, we have seen in other companies also how it is happening. One small emission norms, how much is the cost to the company. And apart from the financial loss, what is the reputational loss? So that is the thing now which is getting very fundamental. They are getting proportion to the fundamental metrics. So even the cost of capital, whenever you're finding, whether we're talking about the startups or the venture capitalists and the people, the large funds who are putting the money in India or any of the investments, they're also looking at even your cost of capital really goes very high. So I feel, this is the right time when as a finance professional, as a cost and management professional, we should be, it's not that we are talking about only, the profits and the other parameters. Now is the time we should talk as a non-financial disclosures. We should see in our annual whatever reporting we are giving to the board. So some meaning should come out of it. And we should be helping or dislike it. It has to be adopted. And it is only for the social cause also. And if we talk about, the business responsibility and sustainability, the standard builds on national guidelines for responsible business framework. And the similar way, if you talk about the guidance on the social responsibility on ISO 26000, and when I was talking to Jyosna ma'am, she's one of the first lady, who has done and do a lot of work in ISO 26000 and on this area. So even she was on the same view. When we are talking about the social governance, when we're talking about ISO 26000 or we're talking about the spectrum, so each core subject has to be addressed. And if you look at, globally, the issues and the parameters are getting same. Maybe the cover would be the different or way the presentation would be different. But today, entire globe has suffered in the same way. So I think that's another issue which we need to consider. And now as an institution, as a chartered accountant or the cost accountant, whatever the institution, as a finance professional, we as an institution need to be very loud and clear how it has to come in our system. How, when we are talking to our fellow professionals, whenever now the reporting parameters would be started, so how we are going to take it things. So that's the reason when we are in the sustainability board of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, there's a lot of depth. We have done a lot of research study, and there is a matter of time where the social stock exchanges would be very much on the board, and they'll be listing on the boards also. So definitely, whatever the CSR fund which are there, so officially you can bring the money to India, they'll be getting listed, and there'll be impact assessment which will be coming today. Earlier, that was missing. CSR was more of a charitable kind of a thing. Now, when we are going to evaluate whatever the money which has been spent, so what is the impact it has been brought into the society? So they have the real index, and it will be more of a standardization. It won't be a charity anymore. So I think that's the real part which we're going to come up on this. So this is my small, and this is the area. Apart from, being a finance professional, I've been, somewhat linked to this, or maybe you can say action for me. Maybe from 2010, we worked very closely in this area. Unfortunately, after so much of hard work and so many presentations to different governments and the regulators, we could see things are moving. Later, this decides.
Thank you, sir. That was a wonderful discussion on how the various value chain partners should connect. And this is, I think, the most critical factor for meeting the goals that we have set. And cost of compliance is a big challenge. And how to optimize it is a issue which the professionals have to step in and see how the cost could be optimized. And three things, very important takeaways, that what should be the necessary mechanism for capturing data on and how one can select a suitable framework, then what should be the level of assurance. These are the major mechanisms which need to be decided, and on which I think we all as professionals can help the businesses. Thank you so much, sir. We will now move on to our next session. The next session is on refining and strengthening sustainability disclosures by businesses. So now we want to hear the business perspectives, that how businesses can help in this in improving the sustainability ecosystem, in moving towards a greener economy. We are very privileged to have with us CA Pratik Shahji. He's a partner with a large firm, and he has got a rich experience of around 19 years with a professional services firm, with 2 years of corporate experience in manufacturing, mining, automobile, and IT sector. He leads the integrated reporting practice of his firm, and he also works on various sustainability assurance engagements. He has led financial reviews for non-government organizations and has deep knowledge and experience regarding the challenges faced by the corporates with regard to their CSR spend through implementing partners. So we welcome you, sir, and we please request you to please start your session.
Thank you, Jyoti. Thanks a lot for this. I hope I'm audible, Jyoti.
Yeah, sir.
Okay. First of all, good evening to all participants, and thank you, CA Niyar Jamusaria ji, CA Praveen Garg ji, and even CA Sanjay Gupta ji for the excellent session thus far, and setting the context to what we have been focusing as a world population together, and laying the fantastic context for the session that I'm going to take. That only makes my work a bit easier. What I'm going to do is, so just let me know once my slides are visible.
Yeah, it's visible. Yeah.
So when we talk about refining and strengthening sustainability disclosures by businesses, I always believe whenever a significant change has to happen, there are generally three pillars of this change. One is the regulators, second is the professional bodies, and third is the corporates that actually put things into practice. Now, in this session of next half an hour or so, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about what is being done by regulators across the world to propagate the agenda towards a single point focus of everybody's focusing on. We'll talk about what's happening globally as well as what's happening in India. In terms of professional bodies, I will also talk about some specific steps in India, especially the ones taken by ICAI and through its body, the SRSP, some of which has been spoken, but I'll probably deep dive a bit more. And last but not the least, I'll talk about two aspects. One is the need for assurance when you submit a report in terms of ESG and sustainability. And last, before I wind up, I'll just talk about what are the key steps one should think about when looking at having the meaningful disclosures around sustainability. Now, I'm taking a step back. Now, this actually can go really long back, right up to 1992, when the Kyoto Protocol was set up, and it was all about carbon. But one of the most recent events, which has led to a real large and compounding impact to what we are discussing today, was something that happened in December 15, and is generally called the Paris Agreement. 196 countries agreed on a particular goal, and one of the most important goal was to reduce the global temperature by 2 degrees to the pre-industrial era, and preferably around 1.5 degrees. Now, many countries have signed up on this, and including India, and we have our own sets, as I think CA Praveen Garg ji alluded in his presentation in very great detail. Now, I'm really proud to say that we as a country are doing many steps across various sectors, and then there are many things to be seen which will happen in the times to come. Subsequent to that, there was the introduction of the UN SDGs. Again, these are one of the most spoke about thing. And then there has been many bodies which have come across in terms of what standards should be used, what are the focus areas. I'm not going to really bore you by a lot of things, but this chart is important for you to understand how the entire global fraternity is moving in a direction of having a very robust disclosure or a step to communicate with your stakeholders in terms of what's happening from a non-financial parameter perspective. And the last one in the entire puzzle is about the foundation coming into play and forming the International Sustainable Standards Board. Now this is a very important step because I strongly believe that any impact eventually will finally find a way into the financial statements. Now, IFRS Foundation, which is connected to the IASB and the body that actually prepares the financial statements, when they come into picture, it's actually going to change the face of the entire reporting, and on all this will start having place in the financial reporting documents that companies do have. Globally, there are many different types of standards which are being used. The first one and the most commonly used is the GRI, or the Global Reporting Initiative, which is commonly called the GRI. Now, this was established in 1997, and they provide wide guidance around sustainability parameters over economic, environmental, and social topics. Now, there has been a huge change in the overall standards. The current standards are called as GRI standards. Before there were G4, and it has been evolving over time. But GRI standards are the one which are now predominant, and any company looking at providing a sustainability report generally follow the GRI standards to ensure that the reporting guidances are given, because they have a very topical structure in terms of disclosure requirements, and based on the parameter looking at, there is guidance available and people follow that. One of the most recent entrant in place was the International Integrated Reporting Council, IIRC. Again, much of this has been talked about, and the concept of IIRC was predominantly around having a very holistic view of the disclosures, financial and non-financial parameters put together and coming up with one report, which will really help the stakeholders understand not just what's happening today, what has happened tomorrow, but what is the plan for the future. So it talked about a value creation story. It talked about a long-term, medium-term, and a short-term goal plan. It started with having what's your overall strategy, where you want to reach, and what are your small steps, medium steps, and large steps to achieve that particular goal. And again, as CMS Sanjay Gupta ji mentioned, it talks about breaking this up into 6 capitals. And it uses a very simple model which has been used overall till now, which is around input, process, and output. But they add a very different layer to it, which is about outcomes. They want to know what is the outcome of our output. So you could generate 10,000 quintals of particular product every year, but what is the outcome of that? That outcomes could be positive and negative. So the IIRC report factored around this particular aspect. The next standard setting body is around the Sustainability Accounting Standard Board, and they have around 77 metrics for around 77 different industries. And these are the important pillars from an ESG standpoint. And ESG, as we know, is environmental, social, and governance. Then TCFD is also a body that provides the right guidances and disclosures in terms of disclosures for climate-related disclosures which are required to be given. Those are around the pillars of governance, strategy, risk management, and other matrices. So depending on what type of focus companies have been following, different standards are available, and they are available. Last but not the least was around carbon disclosure project, and this was mainly again focusing on the carbon emissions. As recent as last year, the IIRC and SASB actually have merged together to become the Value Reporting Foundation. Their aim is very simple: provide complementary tools, simplifying the field. As you can see, there are many standards there. Their single point agenda was how to simplify information, because the information which flows out from a corporate is actually meaningful and makes sense to a reader. And the most important thing is comparability, because if all companies are following different standards, how comparability can be ensured is one of the goal of Value Reporting Foundation. And last but not the least, the goal that they're following is driving global alignment, where, as I mentioned again, they have aligned with the IFRS Foundation and trying to see how they can come up with some tools around a simple reporting format, which is more easy to follow, which is more consistent, and hence not only encourages disclosures, but also enhances comparability. Now, this was also an important event that happened into September 2020. This was in Davos, where it is the World Economic Forum, where around 200 corporates came together, and based on the SDGs and the ESG and various reporting, so the agenda was not to come up with new reporting guidelines, but was to try and identify from the existing sources of information or the sources of standards which are available, what could be the right parameters from each industry perspective. Again, they broke it up into the 4 pillars around principles of governance, people, planet, and prosperity. And based on the guidances available, which you saw on the earlier slide, they have aimed to identify what are the right parameters companies should focus on. Again, they do not intend to insist that these are the only parameters. The guidance is you can use this, and if anything beyond this you want to give, it is something which is encouraged. So this was an overall aim to make those disclosures consistent and informative. So this was one of the steps which has happened. And as I said, again, the last but not the least was around what has happened with the IFRS Foundation. A big announcement is expected in November 21, where they are expected to make a final decision about what the board will do in terms of coming up with the what should be the right disclosures. Now, this is about the IFRS Foundation, which is the standard setting body comparable to FASB in the United States. But IFRS, as you all would know, is very, very predominant across the world. Even US allows this in some select cases in terms of, let's say, a filer coming from the other countries. But the bodies like IASP and SEC also have been insisting a lot on these disclosures. SEC recently has really pushed a lot on climate and ESG related disclosures. The chairman of SEC himself have mentioned that the need of stakeholders and shareholders today is about climate related disclosures and not about only financial aspects of it. So those disclosures will make way into the financial statements. IAASP, which is a body which comes up with auditing standards, this year they have come up with one very comprehensive document in terms of what impact climate could have when you talk about various accounting standards. So there are many bodies trying to focus on this, give different guidances. So what I want to summarize here is in terms of global movement, there are many, many aspects which are being covered. Many bodies are trying to come up with a comprehensive guidance. And a step which has been very strongly taken is towards making one or at least some consistent guidance available which can be applied, which would make the most important thing applicable and possible, which is comparison with different bodies or different corporates. Coming back home to India, we also have a pretty strong history around things that we have been doing. While things have gone much back, but I start from 2011, where the India's NVGs or National Voluntary Guidelines is for social, economic, and environmental and economic responsibilities were issued. That was then followed in 2012 by BRR, or what we call as Business Responsibility Report, and this was made mandated for top 100 listed companies. In 2013, the CSR legislation was made where companies were required to make a provision or a CSR commitment to a certain percentage of your past year's profit. And as we know, recently it has been made much more stringent, and there are penalties, and now it's sort of a mandate expenditure which has to be done. In 2015, the BRR, which was mandated in 2012 for top 100, was expanded to include the top 500. And then we have seen that the disclosure aspects and the applicability aspects of this was much more widened, and companies saw a different perspective to the information which was being shared with the stakeholders and shareholders. In 2017, again, Sebi issued a voluntary requirement in terms of adopting IR, which is the integrated reporting framework, which was completely aligned with what IIRC had given. Over the years, we have seen top 50 to 70 companies following IR, and then they have matured over the years. IR, again, like any other framework, doesn't prescribe specifically what the format of reporting has to be. So companies have evolved on their own, coming up with their own formats and enhancing the amount of disclosures which has been made. 2019, again, there was a significant change in terms of the NVGs. They were revised and then were released. 2019, we know that the BRR was extended to top 1,000 companies. And in 2020, The BRR is proposed to be, or has been replaced by BRSR, which is voluntary for the year FY22, but it will be mandatory for the year ending FY23, and top 1,000 companies will have to give this. So as you can see, we as a country have also made significant progress in terms of sustainability. If I talk about BRSR, I am not aware in my wisdom of any other country mandating such a particular disclosure requirement for the top 1,000 listed entities or any other entity in that country so far. So that's a very welcome step, and will force companies to think differently, act differently. I've been talking to companies, and then when they see the requirement, they know that it is really cumbersome, and they have started working and putting machinery into place for implementing it from today so that they are ready for the year to come. An overview on the BRSR. BRSR has actually 3 components to it: Section A, Section B, Section C, which is around general disclosures, management and process disclosures, and principle-wise performances. There are 9 principles given in the BRSR, which are mentioned on the right-hand side of the slide. And detailed disclosures, including essential indicators and leadership indicators, are required to be given. Now, as I said, this is not a process which is going to tick in the box. It's going to require corporates to put together a team to work on the requirements and ensure that things are in place. From a commitment standpoint, that the right information is shared with the stakeholders and also at the right time. BRSR does not only focus on information which is qualitative, it will also focus a lot on information which is quantitative, which generally we call as KPIs or key performance indicators, and that will help people start measuring and comparing companies the way we have been saying. I also probably want to just bring your notice to a particular report which has been issued by NITI Aayog called as the Voluntary National Review 2020. It's around 200-page report, but it very clearly compares the various actions taken by the government and how does it fit into the SDGs, the 17 SDGs which have been agreed globally. So it's a pretty detailed document talking about various aspects. We have just tried to summarize and then put across. So if you see this SDG 11 about smart cities, so smart cities mission, which is a program that we have put in, including Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. So how does it fit in there? There's a detailed explanation about it. So I would encourage you all to just read this report. It's available freely on the internet, and understand the steps taken by the country towards this particular goal. Again, as I said, I'll talk about the regulators. It's important to talk about professional bodies, and ICAI, through its SRSP, has taken some significant steps. One of the key objectives of SRSP is around developing sustainability standards, providing guidance and tools, liaising with stakeholders, and most importantly, creating the awareness. So what they take in terms of key initiatives is they've come up with a certificate course of BRSR. They come up with sustainability reporting awards, webinars and seminars like this. They conduct on a very regular basis, and most importantly, they are very proactive. They are keeping an eye on what's happening globally. They want to keep the profession and the professionals abreast in terms of the requirements, and also ensure we keep a step ahead. Because if you talk about the global population around 7 to 8 billion, if you are around 1.3 billion, we do have a very significant role to play, and we chartered accountants and other professionals in the fraternity would have a very important role to play in this again. So the entire effort of SRSB is towards keeping the team ready for jumping into the ocean as and when required. Some of the publication that SRSB has issued is, one is of course on the barometer BRSR. It's a very detailed report, how it is to be used and how it can be implemented. It also provides some information around assurance standards. I'll talk about that in just a while. What should be the accountants creating a sustainable world? There's a publication series around that. And sustainable reporting and maturity model. Now that's, I think, the last one, but it's not the least, as it's a very important contribution of SRSB. And I think even CA Praveen Garg and referred about this, how the ratings of entities could be measured using this maturity model. It's a very, very comprehensive document, and there are around total 300 scores, how you can measure the entire applicability around it. So when we talk about all this information, there's one important question which comes in: why should stakeholders care about ESG and climate risks? Now, I just alluded to that earlier in terms of financial impact, in terms of auditing impact, in terms of overall bottom line impact, there could be many risks that could be going around. One of the biggest risks I see would be going right up to going concern challenge, which puts into question whether the business can run as it is going or not. Because if the impact on climate is much more than it can be envisaged, probably running the business the way it was could be a bigger challenge in itself. So from an accountant standpoint, corporation standpoint, auditor standpoint, or any other professional body, the impact on this is going to be high. Now, when this information is being shared with people at large, one question that does come out is what is the authenticity of this information? And like any other financial information which moves out of corporates, it's important to ensure that the information is probably credible and has a 4-eye view, as we call it generally. And hence, assurance or a third-party assurance becomes much more important at this particular point in time. So there are many benefits on why assurance, because one of the elements, while people, and even CMA Sanjay Gupta ji mentioned that the investor focus towards ESG is increasing, I would say it's not just the investors. It's the ambit really goes much beyond it. You talk about the entire ecosystem, which could be your supply chain guys, which could be your vendors, which could be your debtors or your customers. Everybody is looking at what is your ESG contribution and before coming in a relationship with you. Now, if you look at the millennials, and we can probably just go back to our houses and talk to our children who are in schools and what information they're getting. It becomes very important for us to build up a brand which can talk to all of these people and not just the people who are invested in us. It's also important to go to people who are invested otherwise in this entity. And hence, the assurance report would provide that credibility to them. So first and most important part is increased recognition, trust, and credibility. So an assured report and saying that this information has been vetted by somebody else could be a very important step to start that connection and then build that confidence level. Third is second part is reduce risk and increase value. And it's a general trend that we have seen that when people start being reviewed, the amount of rigor which goes into the work, the amount of processes which go, and a third party when they start looking at things, the consistency which is being given in the information given out is much more different. So that's the second benefit of reducing risk and increasing value in terms of consistency. Because if there's an entity which runs around hundreds of units across the world, how you ensure that the information provided is consistent, that's the reduction of risk and the increase of value. So because then report and the numbers going out of the entity have the same source and same amount of rigor which has been exercised. Improved board and CEO level engagement. Of course, when you get an assurance, there are various steps which will have to be right from appointment to the final report approval, and the people who are charged with governance will get involved. And again, the oversight over that becomes very different and more rigor, if I would say so. Study into the reporting and management systems. Again, this is just something that the moment you put out an information in public domain, and again, when somebody is going to rely on that, because the way the processes work, nobody can come and do 100% check. How that information is generated becomes a very important point. And then it comes back to internal control systems and what reporting systems are being used. So the more they are used, the information will be available on the dashboard. And then again, for me, this goes a step beyond that. When a CFO or a CEO is making a decision, let's say for a plant expansion or a plant addition, the questions then will not be just around the profit and the productivity or the quantity which will be produced more. It will also be around what is going to be the carbon emission impact, what is going to be the greenhouse impact around this, what happens to the forest land around my place, what is the social impact in terms of local employment. So many questions will be addressed, and then more systems and processes around. It's more real time and helps and aids only decision making. Improved stakeholder communication. I think we have talked about this much over the entire tenure, and I'm going to talk about this much now. Again, assurance we have talked about. There are many different types of assurance which would go around. Depending on what the disclosures are, what report is being used, there could be different assurance frameworks which are available and can be used by corporates. Again, assurance is not something that people are looking right away from the go. It requires a mature organization and a mature process around for somebody to do an assurance report, because otherwise the implications could be much more higher. And hence, a very measured and a thoughtful process is required. So what companies can actually do is start with assessing what can be done, why it needs to be done, and that could include internal and external assessment. Of course, train and building. This is not only at the team that works, is right up to the boardroom level in terms of exactly what is required, why it is required, and how it is to be done. And then the most important part of implementing. And then it moves into identifying the impact on financial reporting and other communications. Is there a need for external assurance? And then most important part again is reassessing the entire strategy. I think these are the important steps which need to be kept in mind, around which the entire strategy should be structured, which can help any corporate towards an enhanced transparency and more build with their external stakeholders. With that, I think I would just end the session and hand over back to Jyoti. Jyoti, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Can you please stop sharing?
I'll do that.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a wonderful session, and we had a good insight on what are the important requirements. As from this ICAI, like we always say that assurance is very important, and in sustainability report, it is all the more important because the ESG components need to be assured by a professional, by a chartered accountant, so that they increase the trust and credibility of our sustainability reports, which are issued by the businesses, strengthened internal reporting and management systems, improved board engagement. These are very crucial components which can take the ESG agenda forward and can help businesses to truly showcase their sustainability efforts. Thank you so much, sir. Now we move on to our next session. This session is on a very important topic, which is BRSR, Business Responsibility Sustainability Report, Indian ESG Framework and Way Forward. As we all know that BRSR has been issued by Sebi, this new framework, and so we should all know what are the various nitty-gritties of this framework, how the disclosures can be made more robust. And for this session, we have invited Mr. Shikhar Jain, who is Deputy Head of Center of Excellence for Sustainable Development at CII. Sir has got a very rich experience of 25 years as business sustainability expert. He has developed, implemented, and integrated various ESG best practices, enhanced compliance, and risk management framework for several top Indian and global firms. He represents the Confederation of Indian Industry in various committees and working groups of the Bureau of Indian Standards, Accountability UK, and Global Reporting Initiative, and has been involved with development of international standards, ISO 26000, Guidance on Social Responsibility, GRI, AA 1000 on stakeholder engagement. So we invite you, sir, and we'll start our session. Thank you so much.
Jyoti. Yeah, thank you, Jyoti, for the introduction. I have such great panelists with me, starting from Niharji, who had the inaugural sort of views, and I should also say towards the end of the session, because there are two major things that this panelists, all this panel has to look into. One is that as ICAI, we are doing this session under the Azadi Ka Mahotsav, that is the Amrit Mahotsav that Government of India is celebrating, and so do ICAI. And under ICAI, I think the Sustainability Standard Boards, which is doing a very good work. And I think the theme that the Sustainability Standard Board has selected is transforming new green economy. So I think we should not divulge from the topic that we are celebrating under the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. And I think the context was very rightly set by CA Praveen Garg ji, who is also the Special Secretary MOEFCC, which is almost commanding this complete dialogue of green economy, if I say, and the international negotiations which the ministry is part of, especially the COP26 dialogue, which is going on internationally with various stakeholders. And I think to add with that was the practical experience from CMA Sanjay Gupta, who comes with a huge background of international collaborations in this area. And I think CA Prateek has almost covered what I have to say. So I was just thinking, I started with some 25 slides, and going by every presentation, I start deleting it. And then I started adding new ones so that something new could be learned also. So coming to my presentation, assuming that in the background already the context has been set, just taking the theme for today, where we are transforming the new greener economy from CII perspective. One thing that we are promoting, of course, is the adoption of BRSR, which is the Indian ESG framework. What my request to all the participants or all the audience who are listening to this particular session is that we have heard about a lot of ESG frameworks, what Sanjay ji has given, what Prateek has given, which are internationally applicable in India, like DJSI, CDP, Bloomberg's ratings and all. But now that we have an Indian ESG framework, we should all look at with pride, accept it, and we should be the early adopters of this, because it's the global fraternity. The world is looking for us, and I think previous speakers has given some sort of bullet points that how much amount of investment is coming into this area of ESG. So I think what Prateek said, I think I also sort of resonate that by saying that this is the time for India in its 75th year of Indian independence to also show that we are also the champions in this field of ESG. And I think that's where the role of ICAI and other institutes, also ICSI and the Cost Institute, is also very important. I think all the institutes play a very important role into it. So coming to my second slide, I think this all talks came from the investors, and I think these are the key things that corporate India has now to bring into its business strategy. And later in the slide, I will share from my practical experience what has been happening. So most of the investors today are following what is called as UNPRI, which is the United Nations Principle for Responsible Investments. And also this complete dialogue of ESG, rather than a market regulator speaking, has now become a business strategy. So there are 5 areas that you see over here. One is the key areas of intervention that the business has to look in. It has to set its policies, strategies, governance mechanism. Then it has to sort of involve the CFO and the key managerial positions. And I think this is the most important part where ICAI has taken a lead, because all these years while we were speaking on sustainability, we were speaking on integration of the business model. I think the one sort of fraternity or within the industry, the one particular department which was missing was the finance department. And I think this is a great opportunity that if these guys, this fraternity is on board, I think it can do miracles, because then it gets an integrated business model, which is the way forward that Indian companies have to work in. And I think the disclosures are the important part which shapes the relationship and trust, and also alignment with the national and the global framework. So what is important over here is that this is what the international fraternity is doing, and so do in India. We have to do once we have the BRSR, which is mandatory from financial year 23. But Sebi at the same time, and we as CII also feel that there should be an early adoption of the BRSR from this very financial year 22, because companies will have a pilot run test of this when they go into the mandatory part of FY23. So my request to all the participating companies would be that please do look into these guidelines and see that this Indian ESG framework, which is to be a mandatory requirement, gets integrated a year earlier as a pilot test run that you can try. I think this is the complete spectrum of ESG ratings where the Indian companies are getting either rated by DJSI or CDP or by Bloomberg or by Fitch rating. And I think this is also impacting the sort of the corporates a lot, because today they want to attract the ESG funds, and I think that's where the ESG ratings are becoming the boardroom talks. And I think the last 2 years, that is year 2019, the pre-COVID times, and 2020, and the time that continues, and by 2022, the next year, I think this has become established practice in the board reviews and all. And I think that's the way forward. That one of the recent ESG evaluation that came for a public sector company, and I was surprised to see that the independent sort of agency which is doing their ESG rating dropped their rating simply because in the 4 board meetings that have been conducted by this PSU, there had been no reference of an ESG agenda in either of the board meetings. So that's how the transparency is building up, and they want board through the governance mechanism to be a bit serious on this particular dialogue, because that's the way forward, where non-financial reporting is becoming the essential part of the disclosure and needs to have the checks and balance systems in place. What we should also not forget is that when we talk of BRSR, a lot of work has been done in the background by Ministry of Corporate Affairs, which has come out with the national guidelines on responsible business conduct. And I see that this is sort of a Bible for Indian corporates, because all the companies which are not only listed, we are confusing again and again by saying BRSR and 1,000 companies and all. But at the same time, Ministry of Corporate Affairs is saying that all the legal entities, all the registered entities with the company affairs department should also voluntarily go for NGRBC. So irrespective of your size, whether you are listed, not listed, you are a private entity, you should at least adopt or make an attempt to adopt what is called as the national guidelines on responsible business conduct. And it is sort of integrating various aspects of UN principles of human rights and business. It is talking about SDGs, the Paris Agreement, the ILO Convention, the Companies Act 23, and recently amended 2021. So I think this one sort of the guidebook we should not miss while we are framing up our disclosures under BRSR, because most of the BRSR has been extracted out from this particular guidelines which have been released by Ministry of Corporate Affairs. I think this structure has already been presented, so I will not speak much about it. But the key thing over here in this particular structure is that apart from the 3 sections which are there, I think what the participants need to understand over here is this is talking about not only the general disclosures, but it is talking about the management and the transparency related disclosures which are at the management level. And third is your performance related sort of disclosure. So I think this is a unique ESG framework. If you see from the practitioner experience, I should say that it is asking 3 types of disclosures in various sections. It is talking about general disclosures, what your company do, where are your plans, what are your subsidiaries, and this information can be easily sucked out from your annual report also. The B part is very important, where the management and the board provides the direction that how the management processes around ESG works within our company and within the financial year, what had been we doing. And section C over here is the principle wise performance. So performance is the key thing that they are trying to see the performance. And that's why my request to all the corporates and from CI point of view is that if the companies are early adopters in FY 21-22, then they know at least where they were, because in the mandatory part in FY 23, when the companies start, some of the disclosures per se is asking to provide previous 3 years data. So anyhow, if it is a mandated information, it is good to start collecting those data now in the pilot phase, which is the this year. And then they are talking about essential indicators and also the leadership indicators, which are very important, because once the company does disclosure under BRSR, which some of the corporates have already started putting this into the public domain, because that is also an early attraction to the ESG funds, the mutual funds which are looking for the early adopters of the Indian ESG framework. So I think this is also one of the incentives that companies should come on board and at least start sort of piloting this, doing the test runs, whether they have all the informations in place or not, and try doing it. And these are the 3 sections, 9 principles, mapping with SDGs. One important thing in our dialogue with the Sebi we have learned is that a comprehensive sort of a BRSR is talking about 500 data points. And I think this is a very important sort of a framework that Indian corporates have to see, that if this 500 data points within your annual report are going to be there as a part of the mainframe financial analysis, I think this is going to give a very transparent opinion from many of the financial analysts that how is your financial and non-financial information integrated, because this is a real-time test for Indian corporates when they do start reporting on BRSR. One good thing that they have done as a general principle, which Prateek also mentioned, was that because many companies, here I see that while BRSR becomes mandated for 1,000 top listed companies, I think the first 100 or the first 200 listed companies by market cap would be working on some or the other reporting framework. So they've created what is called as interoperability of the reporting framework, and you can do that comparability between GRI, SESB, TCFD, IR framework that you are following. But the compatibility means over here is that you will have to give the disclosure which is there of BRSR and then compare with what you have done in GRI and all. The earlier experience at times in BRR was that if I am doing the GRI report, at the back of the GRI report, I will just give a cross reference to BRR, and that's the way I will say that I have disclosed both GRI and BRR. But here, when you make BRSR a part of your annual report, you will follow the BRSR format, and on some disclosures, you can give a cross reference that this has been already disclosed in my other report, which is a sustainability report or an integrated report or a TCFD or the CDP disclosure that the organization has already done. But one unique opportunity this also brings is the point that now the corporates can start looking for a truly integrated combined report, which is just one annual report giving the financial performance and also talking about the non-financials, which are the BRSR requirements which are coming up. And I think that's the way forward that most of the top 100, 200 listed companies would be doing. But we would have some great challenge from the companies which are from 200 till the next 800 till 1,000, because they will have to do a lot of homework, align the framework within their sort of data management and all, and from where they need to track this information, because this will be something very important. And CII and also ICAI are conducting various programs on this particular aspect to get more knowledge about it. And I think all this is going to lead into better accountability, better transparency by the Indian corporates. And I think it is definitely going to lead what we talk about the title of this particular session, transforming a new greener economy, because this is more a transparent world in which we will be going into. SDG mapping is something unique that already earlier speakers have spoken. So I think this linkage of the Indian ESG framework with SDG is also going to help Niti Aayog, which is tracking all this information as a part of the SDG index. And definitely adoption of BRSR, the way forward is that by 2030, it is going to lead India into one of the foremost countries where the SDGs performance or the SDGs index would be quite high, I think. And I think this is very something very thoughtful that the market regulator has Sebi's thought of, that these disclosures should also be linked to SDGs. And I think that's one good part, because it's going to also help the national SDG index to improve on. Now, this is the most important slide by the invent of BRSR, I should say, where the Indian companies are now going into, is that some of the companies might be still following a laggard approach, which is that the financial reporting is still done separately, and the ESG reporting is altogether separate, and they do not talk to each other. So there is a sustainability report which the sustainability department is making, and the financial reporting is the CFO and their department are looking after it. That's the laggard approach. We will not have much returns in that. But over time, I should say in the last decade, this was the earlier phase, but in the last decade, things are changing. And I think by and large, if we average out, India is somewhere over here where ESG and financials are coexisting. So it's both a financial versus and plus, that's the plus part, the ESG report, which means is that we are also doing the financial disclosure as per the requirements of the law, but also we are also integrating the ESG aspects into our annual report, which is what I was just saying is a combined report, which sort of gives an overall impression about the organization. But the way forward for ESG is that this becomes a part of the business strategy. And that's what the companies in Europe and developed world are leading, where CMA Sanjay Gupta was showing the Bloomberg sort of rating on ESG. Why India is slightly low is that many Indian corporates are trying to reach this, might be the first top 10-15 listed companies have already integrated this as a part of their ESG strategy, which is also very much talking to their business strategy. And I think this is where the companies have to operate now, which is the most important part from the point of view of the ecosystem in which the company operates. They have already taken into consideration the operational stakeholders. By BRSR adoption now, they have to bring the financial stakeholders also talking to the what is called as the unified way of doing an ESG. So the institutional investor, the central banks, the rating agencies, these are the financial stakeholders, I think, which have to be now sort of engaged by the company into their dialogue. As of now, they had been only talking to the operational stakeholders. So I think that is one perceptual change that we are going to look forward. And I think more and more integration of the ESG aspects are also going to help the company to go more greener, more less dependent on fossil fuels, looking into new resources of material and energy efficiencies and all. And I think that's what it is going to transform towards the greener economy. And one thing very important, just to towards the end of my slides, I should say that one good thing that the Sustainability Standards Board of ICAI has done is that they have come out with a what is called as SRMM, which is a Sustainability Reporting Maturity Model version 1.0, where they have the level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. And I think all the practicing chartered accountants and the accountants in the company who are in profession, they can at least do the self-assessment that where are they, if they have to combine the financial performance and the non-financial performance, where are at which level they are. And ICAI has come out with a nice sort of a metrics of this. And then they have given various BRSR score that you can map. You are at a stage 1 of formative stage up to 25% adoption, or you are at the emerging stage from 25 to 50%, or you are at established stage of 50 to 75, or you are leading by example. And I think that's where the distinction will come. And I think Sebi and ICAI will definitely track this, that where are the member companies going in. And for CII, this is also very important information, that how does 1,000 companies fare on this when it becomes mandatory. So my request to all the companies is, if they can go ahead and start adopting it, or at least do the self-assessment and see where are they, will give a lot of sort of satisfaction to them, or dissatisfaction, because they will then have to work more in the time that they can be prepared for in next 15, 16 or 18 months. This is how the linkages are happening with the stock market. And I think in India, two things have happened during the pandemic time. We have the BSE ESG index, which is there, and also the NSE ESG index, which are there. And I think the reports are showing, and then many global studies are showing, that ESG investing has substantially outperformed the traditional indices during the coronavirus period. And I think this is more also reflected when the Bloomberg pandemic stress test was done, that the Nifty 100 ESG company were outperforming the other Nifty 50 index and the Quantum ESG Fund Index. So I think this is the way forward. And I think if some of you have time, do visit the Nifty 100 ESG index, and you will see a lot of insights that how already the stock market has started rewarding the companies which are in total adoption of ESG, and how it is also sort of penalizing the companies who are not performing on the ESG index. So I think towards a greener economy, this has become more like what you call as a important activity of ESG integration through adoption of BRSR that the companies have to start looking into. And that's what I will end my talk with, and request the companies to go ahead and report and be transparent on BRSR process. A lot of work has been done by ICAI on this, and I think we have to go back and submit this data to the policymakers. We have Garg Saab over here. We will have to give this data to Ministry of Corporate Affairs, because then we can show to the world truly how India is transforming through a greener economy, through a market-based norms which are also adopted by ICAI and Sebi. That's all from me, and thanks for inviting me to this panel discussion. Over to you, Jyoti.
Thank you so much, sir. That was indeed a very great discussion on and giving an overview that how ESG ratings are becoming important, and how the financial stakeholders and operational stakeholders should collaborate. And with this, we come to the end of our webinar. On behalf of Sustainability Reporting Standards Board, we express our gratitude to all the esteemed speakers. The participants have definitely benefited from all the esteemed speakers, and the discussions were quite fruitful and very how the things are moving on towards the green economy, how all the pieces in the puzzle are coming together to solve this urgent need of the humanity. As professionals, we all have to come forward. So the transition to a green economy will definitely bring a range of advantages, and a prosperous and thriving green economy will generate the investment, innovation, skills, and entrepreneurship which are needed to transform our products and services, for developing the cleaner technologies, and also for capturing new international markets. The discussions were quite fruitful. I once again thank all the esteemed speakers, Shri Praveen Garg, Shri Sanjay Gupta ji, Shri Shikhar Jain ji, Shri Pratik Shah ji, and thank all the viewers for joining this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.